I'd prefer to be sitting in Tom Ross's seat. He has some really insane cards like Hoogland, the Spirit Dragon, that can just come down and devastate Jeff's board. You know, Karn can do a lot of good work, and Jeff can't really attack Planeswalkers particularly well. He's got some creatures, but he's also has a lot of creatures like Birds of Paradise and Wall of Roots that don't particularly play offense that well. And normally the green-white Tron deck, it doesn't have much game against, you know, an end-of-turn Restoration Angel, untap, combo off, which is one of Jeff's winning lines. But Tom has Path to Exile to be able to break that up.
All right. Looks like both players are going to keep their 7. Tom is going to start things off with an Urza's Tower and a Chromatic Star. He's going to pop the star, draw a card, filter it into another star, and pass the turn. He does not have a second land. Jeff is going to use Windswept Heath, fall down to 19 on Tom's end step. He's going to go find a Murmuring Bosk, and that will enter the battlefield tapped. Let's see if Jeff has a turn 2 play.
And I've seen Tom keep one-landers with a lot of decks, but usually they're decks that have 21 or less lands and don't really rely on them in quite the same way. One-lander's pretty rough for Tom Ross in this situation, and Jeff is able to catapult his mana ahead with this play.
Right, Jeff is going to shock down to 17 and play a Sacred Foundry. He's going to cast a Wall of Roots. Tom does find another Urza's land, so he finds a power plant. He's going to use his star to get green, play his power plant, Sylvan Scrying, go find an Urza's Mine, and next turn he's going to have 7 mana. So he's going to go from 1 mana, missing a land drop, to 7 mana.
Yeah. Fell behind a little bit, but then caught right back up and exceeded, you know, where the average player would be.
It looks like he has an Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, and an Oblivion Ring in his hand, or Oblivion Stone in his hand.
Yeah, another really good sweeper against Jeff's all creatures deck. Jeff does have Selfless Spirit though.
Yeah, we'll be able to save the rest of his creatures. He was able to deploy Selfless Spirit and a Birds of Paradise on his turn.
And Tom even has a Relic of Progenitus, I believe, floating around in his hand, which means that in a longer protracted game where cards like Revelark and Eternal Witness come into play, Tom's going to have some game against even those.
So it looks like he's going to play his Mine, tap it for 2 mana, play an Expedition Map, and a Relic of Progenitus. Let's see what he decides to do the rest of his turn. There's an Oblivion Stone, and just going to pass the turn.
And we could see in the previous match that Jeff's deck is really good at clogging up the board against other creature decks that are looking to attack on the ground. But in this situation, you know, his defense is just inadequate, basically.
And an attack for 2 from Selfless Spirit is going to knock Tom down to 18. Jeff has a Razorverge Thicket. He's deciding what he wants to do with the rest of his turn. He's just going to pass. Tom will sacrifice his Expedition Map on Jeff's end step. Let's see if he gets another Tron land, or if he just goes and gets something that will give him green and white mana, since he has Path to Exile and Sylvan Scrying in his hand.
Yeah, playing Ulamog seems like a pretty juicy option. He does need to worry about end of turn Restoration Angel, untap, Kiki-Chord. The mana is available for Jeff to do that.
So he is just going to go get a Brush Land, and that will go into his hand. For his turn, he's going to draw another Urza's Mine.
And he's only taking 2 damage a turn, so there's not really a rush for Tom to really do anything. So he can kind of play this on the safe side.
That Selfless Spirit is just going to attack for 2.
The Grizzly Bear beatdown.
It could be that he's just like wanting to Oblivion Stone to get rid of the spirit, and then follow up with an Ulamog to get rid of everything else. Or he could just path the spirit and then Oblivion Stone in response to the sacrifice.
Could do that too. I almost like doing nothing. Well, I guess, yeah, because now you get to play Ulamog with path mana available.
Yeah.
And Ulamog's indestructible, so the stone's not going to blow him up. And, I mean, Jeff just doesn't really have a board worth sweeping at this point, you know? It's like, what is Tom, like, Tom doesn't care about this 2-power flyer.
Well, he's just going to play Urza's Tower and pass the turn.
So I don't mind doing nothing with your mana for 1 turn, but doing nothing for 2 turns in a row seems like a lot to me.
Selfless Spirit is going to come in for 2 points of damage, knock Tom down to 14. He's going to play a Voice of Resurgence. Looks like Tom will let it resolve. Jeff has a Plains. And a Path to Exile on Jeff's end step, targeting Selfless Spirit.
And if Jeff had a Restoration Angel here, would have been pretty disastrous.
All right, he's going to let that happen and get an Elemental.
Modern Challenge players, you're around 3.
All right, so Tom is going to exile Graveyards.
Modern Challenge players, round 3 is posted.
Yeah, and it looks like he just wants all of that stuff to stay exiled. It looks like he's digging for a little more action, so maybe Tom just didn't have everything that he wanted to be working with, but now with a clean board, I have to imagine that Tom's going to slam some huge haymaker.
So at the end of it all, Jeff Hoogland is going to have a Voice of Resurgence token, the Elemental. Tom will use, so he's going to Sylvan Scrying here and go find.
Does he have Eye of Ugin?
Yes, Sanctum of Ugin.
Ah, okay.
So
now you can start
he's
chaining.
going to be able to chain an Ulamog into another Ulamog.
Does that seem like a good play to you?
I mean, it's all
Ulamog
right.
into Ulamog?
It's all right.
It's all right. So what's nice about this is if Jeff had something like Path to Exile, which would be completely be reasonable because it's something that Jeff could have drawn and wouldn't have had a target for, and he does indeed have it. So Tom doing it this way ensures that he still has gas, which is a pretty nice heads-up play on Tom's part. This is just the safest way to do this.
Well, now Jeff has a Eternal Witness, which will get back that Path to Exile, so we'll have an answer for this next Ulamog. But Tom has a couple Karn Liberate in his hand that he might just be able to use to start picking off some white mana sources.
And he just drew another Relic of Pretenders. Would have loved to have had that for the
path.
Yeah. I still have to imagine that from this stage, Tom Ross is like 90% to win. I mean, he just has a ton of mana. He still has a full grip full of powerful plays. And Jeff is not working with very many resources.
Right.
And Jeff would like to attack Tom's life total, but he probably needs to attack this Karn. I don't really know if the attacking the Karn really gets anything done either, but we'll see what he does.
So Tom is just going to Karn, and plus it's going to get a copy of Collective Brutality out of Jeff Hoogland's hand. He'll play another piece of Tron and put another Oblivion Stone onto the battlefield.
You know, and one of the things that I was really excited about this tournament was seeing if our stock players, and I even mentioned Tom Ross being an Infect player, if they stuck with the deck that they're most known for, or if they decided to deviate, because the format has been getting switched up so much. So it's pretty exciting here to see Tom Ross not playing his Infect deck and choosing this green-white Tron deck instead. I'm curious to see if it's a metagame call or if he feels like this green-white Tron deck is just the best deck, but we'll get a little more information about that as this tournament goes and seeing how well Tom does.
Yeah. All right, Jeff is just going to use a Chord of Calling to get a Qasali Pride Mage and use it to kill off that Oblivion Stone. Tom is going to plus Karn yet again. He's going to take a Path to Exile out of Jeff's hand.
And despite Jeff being in a bad situation, he still has some good top decks that could just kind of win the game. And so, you know, Tom probably wants to attack Jeff's red mana for that reason. But if Jeff can just sort of bide his time and trade draw steps for a little bit, he may be able to get some running top decks to actually steal this game away from Tom Ross.
All right, so a Path to Exile is going to take care of Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger. This Eternal Witness is just going to keep attacking, going to knock 2 counters off of that Karn Liberated.
And Tom Ross's hand is starting to diminish. So he has a redundant Karn in his hand that's not really doing anything. And what he really wants is just to keep hammering, you know, haymaker style play after haymaker style play. One of the decks that we'll see in these Tron decks that can do help enable that is Sanctum of Ugin, but that unfortunately is not a card that's in Tom Ross's list. Or, excuse me, not Sanctum of Ugin, Eye of Ugin.
It's also banned.
Oh, yeah.
In
Jeez.
Modern.
Well, that's definitely a good reason not to have it in your deck then.
Yeah, that card would be really good in
Yeah.
Tom's deck. All right, this Eternal Witness is just going to keep working on that Karn.
Yep, nibbling away.
And a Voice of Resurgence. Tom does have 2 copies of Wormcoil Engine and a World Breaker in his deck that he can use to close this game out. Along with that Ugin the Spirit Dragon, which would be a real good draw.
Yeah, I wonder if one of the more likely ways for Tom to win is just ultimating his Karn. That'd be pretty interesting.
Especially if he can start minusing it on some of those creatures that Jeff has.
Yeah.
All right, Tom is going to take a point of pain from his brush land. He's going to Path to Exile the Voice of Resurgence off of Jeff Hoogland. Lets him go get another forest. He's back up to 4 mana, but I don't think he has very many more red sources in his deck.
Yeah,
that's what Tom has been prioritizing.
Yep, the lack of red mana is a big deal. And it's certainly no mistake that Tom Ross has been targeting those. He wants to cut out Kiki-Chord as a way for Jeff Hoogland to steal this game.
All right, so Karn is going to exile the Eternal Witness. Jeff just draws a land for the turn. Karn's going to plus, get rid of another card.
And basically Jeff is trying to protect his Court of Calling here because if he draws Eternal Witness, it would be a great thing to tag.
Yeah, he has 2 more Eternal Witness in his deck.
Wow, and you can see Tom going directly for the red mana. Pretty big deal. What Tom really wants here is just like a fireball. Fireball would be pretty good here.
Yeah.
It's like the channel's already accounted for.
Oh, Tom is going to plus Karn. Jeff is going to Chord for 2 in response. He's going to let him go get a Voice of Resurgence.
And it's nice that Voice of Resurgence is a, durable threat, but the 2 power isn't that big, meaning that it can easily get blocked by the Spellskite. And Tom Ross, because he's playing the white version, does have access to cards like Path to Exile.
Oh, and here's Ancient Stirrings.
There we go. Let's get some action.
Wormcoil or...
Oh, we get a redraw.
World Breaker, just a Chromatic Sphere. Got to cycle it, get some mana. Ancient Stirrings. Cast the Ancient Stirrings.
Come on, give me something big.
Well, there's Ugin.
There we go. And that'll be game. That's worthy for Jeff to scoop up. He's been blown out by that card before. He doesn't need his opponent to resolve it again.
All right.
We know how this story ends.
So Tom Ross is going to take game 1 here with Green-White Tron over Jeff Hoogland on Kiki-Chord. Let's take a look at these players' sideboards so we can see just what we think is going to happen. So one of the reasons Tom is on green, or white instead of the traditional green-red, is that you gain access to cards like Blessed Alliance against Infect, which is traditionally a bad matchup for Tron, and cards like Rest in Peace against Dredge, which is traditionally not a great matchup for Tron. So we have 3 Blessed Alliance, 3 Nature's Claim, 3 Warping Wail, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Thragtusk, a Ravenous Trap, and a Ghost Quarter. What do you think Tom's going to bring in?
So I don't think Tom has particularly great options. I could see the Rest in Pieces coming in to maybe replace the Relic of Progenituses. The hating out Jeff's Graveyard isn't particularly powerful, but it is useful. Tom could also bring in Thragtusk just to make it so that he doesn't get rushed down as quickly. I don't think he really needs the Blessed Alliances. His opponent Blessed Islands Alliance against a Voice of Resurgence deck doesn't seem very good to me.
Now on Jeff's side, we have 2 Blessed Alliance, 1 Eidolon of Rhetoric, 1 Engineered Explosives, 1 Fulminator Mage, 3 Ghostly Prison, Reclamation Sage, 2 Slaughter Games, 2 Stony Silence, and 2 Surgical Extraction. What do we think is good here?
So Jeff has some decent options. I think that he's going to be bringing in the Fulminator Mages, the Reclamation Sage. I think he'll actually bring in Slaughter Games too. And Stony Silence also has some decent utility against all of Tom's artifacts.
I can agree with all of that. Now, it feels like there's just a new Magic set coming out all the time.
There is. That's why I love it. Keeps things fresh.
And we have a new one coming up here pretty soon, Aether Revolt. So let's talk a little bit about the Aether Revolt pre-release and this exclusive creature collection, Matt, you can get of Pandra Nalar.
Super sweet.
She is a red panda who likes to set things on fire. We need to come up with names for the other characters that are on this mat. So I don't know if there are names out there floating around already, but please tweet at Andy, myself, and SCG Live on what you think that the 2 different bird characters, there's an Ethereum bird, which looks like it might be Tezzeret, supposed to be Tezzeret, and the other 2 characters, please tweet at us. But to get this playmat from the pre-release, January 14th through 15th, limited edition playmat available at participating stores. Go.starcitygames.com/pre-release. Let your local game store know that you're interested in having this playmat and the SCG pre-release in your local store so they can get a hold of us to get signed up for that. And you too can have your Pandra Nalar playmat. I know I want to try and get one.
So for this next game, I'm looking for Jeff to be a lot more interactive than he was in the first one. He had some good Path to Exiles that bought him time, but he wasn't really able to shut Tom Ross down in any meaningful way. So I'm looking for Jeff to draw some of those sideboard cards and really disrupt Tom. Otherwise, Tom's going to be able to just do what he did in the last game, just play these big haymaker-y cards that Jeff really has no way of dealing with. Hoogland in particular is just the monster play that Tom Ross has, and we've seen it just utterly destroy Jeff before.
Yeah, Hoogland's just very good against Jeff's deck in particular.
Yeah.
Oblivion Stone is also very good against Jeff's deck.
At least against Oblivion Stone, Jeff has the Selfless Spirits and Voice of Resurgence. So.
Well, both players are going to keep their starting 7. Jeff's going to lead off with a Birds of Paradise, and Tom has a Chromatic Star. Let's see what Jeff has for turn 2. Ooh, I see Surgical Extraction in his hand.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
We've got a Wall of Roots and a Spellskite for Jeff. Going to pass the turn back. Tom might be able to generate a whole lot of mana, but Jeff's deck can as well.
Yeah, Jeff is certainly off to the races here. Vomiting creatures onto the board and ramping up his mana.
All right, well, it looks like Tom has an Urza's Power Plant to go along with his Mine. And with that Chromatic Star, or Chromatic Sphere, he can cast the Sylvan Scrying in his hand to get the tower and assemble Tron for next turn. All right, well, he's just going to filter a green mana through his Chromatic Sphere. And Sylvan Scrying is going to go find him a tower.
You know, and it's funny with this green-white Tron deck, it only plays 4 copies of each piece of Tron. It's pretty important that it assembles it, and a lot of times, you know, you would look at the deck and be like, oh, it's probably not that consistent, like how often does the deck draw these cards? But the green-white Tron deck, it's so good at seeing them. It really is a pretty consistent deck.
Yeah, between the 8 cyclers with Chromatic Star and Chromatic Sphere, you also have Expedition Map, Sylvan Scrying, and Ancient Stirring. So a large percentage of this deck is you know,
just ways to find your lands.
Used to find your lands.
Yeah.
And then you have all the payoffs, the old big boom booms. It's like we have a World Breaker and an Ulamog in Tom's hand.
And so many of the cards like Ancient Stirrings, they find your mana early on when you need the mana, and then they find your payout cards later on when you need to pay out.
All right, so Tom is just going to play a Razorverge Thicket and an Oblivion Stone.
And I like this sequencing by Tom because he wants to make it so that he has access to green mana.
Oh!
Oh.
And Jeff is just going to find a copy of Kiki-Chord off the top.
Wow.
After that end step Restoration Angel, turn 4, Jeff Hoogland.
Sometimes you just draw your 1-up to win. And
Just going to steal this game.
That was a turn 3 kill from Jeff.
This is turn 4. He was on the play.
It was turn 1 birds, turn 2. Oh, no, it was turn 4. You're right. You're right.
Turn 4 kill.
Yep.
From Jeff Hoogland with his Kiki-Chord deck.
Insane.
Man.
Really good.
So, to be fair, with 4 mana and the 4 creatures that he had in play, Chord of Calling was also lethal.
Yeah.
So he might have had Chord of Calling and didn't even need the Kiki-Chord there. But still, that's how you're going to be able to
Can't
steal
really
this
Chord
game.
of Calling for your 1-of when you just drew it.
Yeah, I got it right here. It's harder to cast than Chord 4.
Yeah,
but he
it's
had
true.
he had the 3rd red source. So
Wow,
going in here
unbelievable.
to game 3, we didn't really get to see what Tom brought in outside of the Thrag Tusk. Seeing how that game played out, do you think he potentially wants to make any changes?
I don't think so. I think he's just going to be working with all the same stuff.
Same on Jeff's side?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as we saw there, Jeff was able to use a Wooded Foothills to go get a Stomping Ground to kill his opponent. And while Jeff has all of his cards are non-foil, if you are a fan of the Shiny, head on over to StarCityGames.com for our weekly sale, where you can get Masterpiece Series cards up to 25% off. Crucible of Worlds, Scalding Tarn, Chrome Mox, Mystic Gate, or any of the other Expeditions from Battle for Zendikar block, or Inventions from Kaladesh, up to 25% off the StarCityGames.com weekly sale. It ends Monday at 10:59 a.m.
Yep.
Andy, you think you're going to check that out, get some of those cards?
Well, I'm a big fan of winning, but I'm an even bigger fan of winning in style. And having some shiny cards is definitely a good way to do that.
All right, so it looks like Tom is going to take a mulligan here. So while Tom is shuffling up a little bit, let's learn a little bit more about the boss. He's got that leather jacket on. That's just how he likes to roll. He has 33, lives in Roanoke, Virginia. He has 15 open top 8s with 4 wins, 4 invitational top 8s with 2 wins. He is the self-proclaimed best GoldenEye 64 player and has beaten people using only his feet. I hope he used his own controller for that. Along with Michael Majors, he puts 8% of all tournament winnings towards buying an NBA Jam arcade. And he used to parkour and can still do backflips. You know, every time I read that, I want to ask him to do a backflip, and I just always forget.
One of the things that I like most about that slide is it says that he's beat people.
You're not just
plural
one person.
with his feet, so it's not just one.
All right, so Tom is going to keep his 6. He's going to lead off here with an Expedition map. Jeff just has an Overgrown Tomb tapped, and he's going to pass the turn back.
And that last game was pretty important for Jeff. He kind of needs to steal a win here, in my opinion, and that's definitely the way to do it. I would not be surprised if Tom had just done a good 2-0 clean sweep.
Yeah, stealing one of these games is really huge, especially if it's a game where variance isn't affecting the Tron player. This is a game that it looks like that might be the potential, but Tom just picked up his 2nd piece of Tron, and along with the Expedition map that he has on the battlefield, he can already assemble it next turn, which is pretty bad news for Jeff.
Yeah, and I think that the combo kill with Kiki-Chord is probably Jeff's best way to win this match. So I think you're going to see both of the players alter their lines of play based on that specific detail.
Right, so Jeff is going to add a Spellskite to his board and another tapped land, a Stomping Ground. Let's see here, Tom is just going to sacrifice his Expedition map on Jeff's end step.
And we can see in this game, Jeff's draw is much slower. He's got maybe a little bit more attacking power, but he doesn't have as much mana as he did in the previous game, and he just doesn't have as much stuff. So Tom not only being on the play this game, but facing a slower draw means that Tom's going to have just a lot more breathing room than he did in the previous game.
Well, Tom was able to snag an Urza's Power Plant there on Jeff's end step, which will complete Tron. And in addition to what looks to be a Wormcoil engine in his hand, he just found a Karn Liberated.
Yeah, and I think he's got a Path to Exile too. So Tom Ross has a lot of options here. He can choose to play things in a safe way and keep that white mana available. and that way he won't be blown out by a potential Kiki-Jiki, but he will need to deal with the spell sky one way or the other, and Karn's a pretty good way to do that.
Okay, so it looks like Tom was going to use his Chromatic Star, but has decided not to. I think they might be deliberating if he's locked into that action or not, since he did not draw the card.
And this is kind of an exciting match too, because I believe these two players are kind of in a heated race, aren't they?
Yeah, they are definitely in a heated race.
So there's a lot on the line for this match. It's not just about advancing this one round. This is like a match that really has implications for the entire Players' Championship. So pretty exciting. So if you were going to be playing one of these decks, which one do you think you would be on?
Well, I have the Kiki-Chord deck build, but that green-white Tron deck looks absolutely great. Which one of these do you like?
Yeah, I've been pretty impressed with the green-white deck. I've faced it a few times, online. It's not quite as popular as the green-red style Tron deck, but the green-white one, because it has Rest in Peace, it's like a pretty big deal. The deck usually has a hard time with Dredge, but you can just slam Rest in Peace, and it's one of the best hate cards possible.
Yeah, like the big benefit of being red in the Tron deck is, in addition to like Ancient Grudge out of your sideboard, you have Pyroclasm in the main, and that's like the big allure to it. But like, Pyroclasm isn't even all that good anymore.
Yeah, Pyroclasm is not as good as it used to be.
There aren't decks where it's going to be a slam dunk against. In fact, like Affinity is like really the only deck that you're just like really excited to play against, that you have Pyroclasm in your main.
And I mean, against Affinity you have Stony Silence instead, so.
Exactly. Okay.
All right, so it looks like Tom Ross is dropping his Karn and exiling Jeff's hand, and I'm excited to see how this game develops.
Okay, yeah, so it looked like he was locked into sacrificing the star, but he was able to not use the Tron land for it, so he used his Razorverge Thicket and then played his third land, which gave him Tron, allowed him to play Karn, and then he plussed it, taking the Revelark out of Jeff's hand.
So now we'll have to see what Jeff does here. He's in a little bit of a precarious position because on the one hand, it's a little nerve-wracking to add to your board when you know that your opponent can potentially sweep it away. That said, I don't think Jeff can really play around a sweeper, and he really needs to get some bodies onto the board so that he can push, Oh, wow, Slaughter Games.
All right, so we're going to get a Slaughter Games.
So I have to imagine that this goes for Ugin.
I think that he named Ulamog the Sleeces Hunger.
I feel like I would be more afraid of Ulamog killing everything, but it looks like he's going after Ulamog. So the nice thing about this is it means that Tom Ross can't attack Jeff's red mana. So even if Tom is able to play an Ugin and wipe Jeff's board, Tom is not going to be able to lock Jeff out of winning with a Kiki-Jiki.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main reason for this line of play. And there's potential that Jeff may just Eternal Witness and cast Slaughter Games again.
And so Tom's hand is going to be a Ghost Quarter, another Razorverge Thicket, Path to Exile, and a Wormcoil Engine.
And this Wormcoil Engine is going to play great guard duty for this Karn.
Jeff will attack the Karn down to 8 counters with the Voice of Resurgence. All right, Karn is going to plus. Going to take a Surgical Extraction out of Jeff's hand.
One thing worth noting that Jeff did there is Jeff checked the Oracle text on a card before naming it with Slaughter Games. And I think that's something that a lot of players don't do enough. We've seen in high-profile matches where someone has, something like a Pithing Needle or, whatever, and they name the wrong card. And it only takes a second to just check the Oracle text, double-check the card, and I think that's a great thing for a lot of people to do, and I like seeing Jeff doing it right there.
Yep.
Even if you think you know the card, if there's any shadow of a doubt, You can just ask a judge and double check so that you don't get into any awkward situations.
Yep, don't be afraid to call a judge.
Yeah.
Tom is just going to add that Ghost Quarter and a Wormcoil Engine to his board. Jeff will pass back with 4 mana untapped, which screams Restoration Angel. Let's see how Tom decides to navigate this turn. That Spellskite for Jeff is going to give him some protection against the Path to Exile that he knows Tom has in his hand. I honestly wouldn't be too surprised to see Tom try and get rid of that Spellskite with Karn.
Yeah, I feel like Tom made the attack to try to bait out the Restoration Angel, and now he's trying to decide, should I still play around a Restoration Angel? Which is kind of tough. If it was... Yeah.
Yeah, if he tries to Karn the Spellskite, then Jeff can resto it.
So the thing that's a little tricky about this, though, is if the whole reason to have Path to Exile is to make it so that you're protected from a Kiki-Jiki combo, if you minus the Karn on the Spellskite and Jeff blinks it with the Restoration Angel, and then you have to use the Path to Exile on the Spellskite so it doesn't get blinked, you're still down a Path to Exile for a potential Kiki-Jiki.
So Tom is going to Karn targeting one of Jeff's lands. Jeff will redirect it to Spellskite and then use Restoration Angel to try and blink the Spellskite.
And this is a great play from Tom Ross because this means that he won't die to a top deck Kiki-Jiki, and he still gets to keep his Path to Exile.
Well, the Spellskite ability has resolved, so Karn is now targeting Spellskite.
Oh, I understand.
Now that once it gets blinked by Restoration Angel, the original target won't be there, so the ability will fizzle. And there isn't going to be a point where Spellskite's not on the battlefield to not protect the Restoration Angel from the Path to Exile that's in Tom's hand. So this is going to work out not how Tom wants it to.
Well, yeah, it was, I think, a great play from Tom Ross, but countered by a great play from Jeff Hoogland.
Absolutely. Now Tom just has to be worried here about the potential for a Kiki-Jiki.
Well, not if Jeff can't get a
So I think Jeff
another
has a
red
basic
source.
mountain in his deck.
Ooh,
so
he does. Nice.
there is the basic mountain, so he still needs a red source and the Kiki-Jiki. We know that he does not have one in his hand.
Well, he's down 1 red source, so that, helps Tom with the top decks.
He does have a Birds of Paradise, though, which does give him a red source if he needs it.
Oh, wow. And Tom just goes for another Ghost Quarter to get the other red source.
So that's going to help keep him off hard casting Kiki-Jiki. But we are just 1 land away from being able to Court of Calling for Kiki-Jiki.
Yeah.
Ooh, and there's a fetch, so he actually can play this Birds of Paradise and a fetch land and still be able to hard cast Kiki-Jiki.
Wow, and a Wall of Roots. So he's got some chump blockers too, so that this Wormcoil Engine doesn't kill him right away.
So now Tom is going to be able to use Karn and that Path to Exile here to effect.
Yep. And I feel like this is a good time for Tom to path the Spellskite. He knows that he doesn't need to play around Restoration Angel on this turn. He's probably going to lose his Karn anyway because there's, a fair amount of stuff on the board. Although he could choose to play defense with the Wormcoil Engine and tick the Karn up. But oh, so he actually goes after the Restoration Angel.
Yeah.
So what's nice about this play?
This will make Jeff pay 2 life.
Mm-hmm. If that had resolved, what would have been nice about it is it would have meant that the Wormcoil Engine could have just held the ground while Karn just kept ticking up each turn.
Okay, so Tom is just going to play a land and pass. Jeff is going to fetch on his end step. He doesn't have another red source to get tapped. Does not look like it. Nope, there's the stomping ground. Oh, so he's getting a forest off of the path, and then the stomping ground off of the fetch. It's going to fall down to 7. And now we can leave the Wormcoil Engine back on defense.
Yep.
Let's see what Jeff finds off the top.
And what Tom Ross did, it basically did, you know, the turn ended up the same way that I thought it would, but by making Jeff use his Spellskite, it meant that Jeff took an extra 2 damage. So nice tight play from Tom, making sure that he gets every last piece of damage possible.
So we're just going to plus the Karn. Jeff is hellbent. And everything's all exiled, so a Chord of Calling.
Yeah, Chord of Calling isn't going to do a whole lot.
Well, he can chord for an Eternal Witness to get back the chord, and then chord for a Resto to blink the Eternal Witness and get back the chord, and then chord for a Kiki-Chord. So,
that sounds like a nice line of play.
Chord of Calling will line up to be a win over a couple of turns if he can find one.
Yeah.
Fulminator Mage, though, is just going to add another body to the board. And we might just end up seeing this Karn continually tick up. Or he might just start alternating up and down and just removing Jeff's creatures. Like, getting rid of Voice of Resurgence here isn't all that bad of a thing.
Yeah, it's not all that bad of a thing. The other nice thing about starting to work on Jeff's creatures is it would mean that Wormcoil Engine can start attacking. That said, he can also just keep ticking it up and start attacking with the Wormcoil Engine.
Yeah. It's going to plus, pass the turn.
So unless Tom intends on ultimating his Karn, I think I would prefer just attacking with it.
Ooh, Reclamation Sage is going to take care of potential Wormcoil Engine.
But goes after the map of Expedition instead, or Expedition map, which
Expedition,
I like because then Tom would have 2 3/3s, one of which he could attack with, one of which he could block with.
Ancient Stirrings. There's a World Breaker and another Karn.
World Breaker could conveniently
and a Wormcoil Engine.
pop the Stony Silence, which would be kind of a nice play. Also, it would be a reach creature, so top deck Restoration Angel wouldn't be able to pressure the Karn. So I like World Breaker here quite a bit.
He also could get rid of one of Jeff's red sources.
Yeah, and we've seen him target his red mana over and over and over again. I think that's a trend we're likely going to continue to see.
It looks like we're going to minus the Karn on the Voice of Resurgence.
And I feel like that's a sign that we're going to be going for attacks relatively soon, if not this turn.
World Breaker, the Stony Silence, and then no attack with Wormcoil Engine.
Tom Ross, we know him for aggression oh so well, but it looks like he knows how to play a slow game too.
There's Eternal Witness. It just gets back a Slaughter Games.
And I feel like this is definitely going after Ugin. I feel like Ugin is the one big draw here that Jeff is really worried about.
And Ugin the Spirit Dragon.
And after getting Ugin, all of a sudden I feel like Tom kind of needs to win with the cards he has in play, because there's really not a whole lot left for him to draw in his deck.
That is true. This Karn alternating up and down will give him so, will slowly start to take over the board. World Breaker does have reach, but I don't believe that it has vigilance.
Yeah.
Jeff is just going to pass the turn back to Tom. Well, there's a Karn right off the top. Maybe we just see a minus and then a Karn and another minus.
There we go. Get in there.
All right, Wall of Roots is going to chump. Jeff is going to stay at 7. Tom will go up to 30.
And this is also important because it makes Chord of Calling shenanigans a little bit more difficult by limiting the number of creatures that Jeff has access to.
Karn is going to minus on the Eternal Witness.
And Jeff could have blocked with the Fulminator Mage and then sacked it to deny Tom Ross the life, but I think Jeff really wants to preserve every possible attacking creature that he has access to, so that if he draws a Path to Exile for the defending Worldbreaker, Jeff could potentially snipe the Karn.
Mm-hmm. Right, Karn is going to minus here. Take care of Reclamation Sage. Going to attack with both creatures.
Yep, and I think Fulminator Mage is going to have to play guard duty on this turn. I think that is probably a better chump blocker than Birds of Paradise, but we'll see. And this has been a game where Tom just was able to do basically whatever he wanted, and Jeff was never really able to mount an offense, never really able to mount a defense, wasn't able to mount a whole lot of disruption.
This is also a game that highlights just how good having access to Path to Exile is in this Tron shell.
Yeah, I agree with that. Tom's like, I'm going to kill all your stuff.
Going to pay a full 7 for Karn, since Jeff was able to take him off of Tron with that Fulminator Mage.
And there's that Murmuring Bosk.
Going to fall down to 1. Let's see what he can cobble together here.
Do you think he's going to tap his Murmuring Bosk for
a white or a black
yeah.
mana? He might.
If you're going to go, you might as well go honorably.
Lightning Bolt's not going to do it.
And he bolts himself. I believe he did point.
All right, well, Jeff is going to go out the honorable way with his own Lightning Bolt. And Tom Ross is going to take this grudge match. He's going to move on to 5-0 with his green-white Tron deck. Jeff is going to fall to 4-1 with his Kiki-Chord deck. That played out about how we expected it to.
Yeah.
But the games were still pretty interesting.
Yeah, the games are still pretty sweet. There's a lot of stuff going on, and in particular, just to kind of showcase the match,